The new LA Kings lineup looks to get the team back on track against the Red Wings. We've got that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Well, the LA Kings will host the Detroit Red Wings tonight, looking to snap a 3-game losing skid. We'll have a preview of the game, a scouting report on the Wings, and tell you what the Kings need to do to get a big victory tonight. Tonight's game is also the last time we're going to see the Kings if you're in LA at Crypto.com Arena, as they get set to embark on a 10-day, 6-game road trip, the longest and busiest road trip of this season. We'll tell you about that a bit as well. But we start with some questions from Wednesday's show being answered. Well, at least some of them. First and foremost, was defenseman Tobias Bjornfot claimed off waivers? The answer is unfortunately yes. The team that claimed him is unfortunately a division rival, the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, we saw with Samuel Fagemo earlier this season, it is possible that Bjornfot could become available for the Kings to get back and reclaim him if Vegas puts him on waivers. But for now, the former first-round pick, 22nd overall by the Kings back in 2019, is gone. Now, do I think this is a huge loss for the Kings? No. Do I think it's good that the Kings lost a former first-round pick for nothing? No. But clearly the Kings, who didn't want to lose Tobias Bjornfot, realize he's not an essential piece of this organization. He's not like a Samuel Fagemo. Fagemo is a young player that could be a nice piece for the Kings in the future. The Kings were lucky to get him back. As for Bjornfot, if they have a chance to get him back, I assume they will so. But he has had his chances to impress the organization, show that he is an important piece of this franchise, and for the most part, he didn't do that. Plus, as we talked about on Wednesday's show, defenseman Jacob Moverar has shown that he can fill in the kind of role that Bjornfot likely would have if necessary, and that is a short-term injury replacement. On the blue line, we saw it with Vladislav Gavrikov when he went down for a handful of games, and Moverar came in and played fine. Nothing spectacular, nothing outstanding, but good enough to plug a hole for a short period of time, and that was really all Tobias Bjornfot was going to be called on to do for the Kings as well. He was in a battle with Andreas Englund at the start of the year. Englund won that battle easily and has proven to be, in a short period of time, a much better player than Tobias Bjornfot. So, again, not great that the Kings lost Tobias Bjornfot, but to be realistic, it's not a huge loss anyway. I do have one question, though, and we still have questions to be answered. But Bjornfot, he's gone. So the Kings have lost him, but did they have to? Brandt Clarke has been called up. But if he's going to replace Jordan Spence, and that is a question that has not been answered yet, why not send Jordan Spence down to the AHL? Both he and Clarke are on their entry-level deals, and as I understand it, they can be sent back and forth as many times as the Kings want from the AHL to the NHL without having to clear waivers. Obviously, Tobias Bjornfot was not still on his entry-level contract, and that's why he had to go through waivers, didn't clear, and is now gone. So I do have that question about the move for the LA Kings. So that does bring us to another question that is not answered as of this moment, and that is, where is Brandt Clarke going to play? Now, Drew Doughty was not at practice on Wednesday. The Kings called it a maintenance day. They said that Drew Doughty was fine. There wasn't an injury. He'd be in the lineup tonight, and that has been confirmed. Drew Doughty will play tonight. So just a day off for a veteran player that racks up a lot of ice time. Nothing to see here. Now, had Drew Doughty been injured or was nursing some sort of a little bump or a bruise or an illness, I would have assumed that Matt Roy would have been bumped up to the top pairing with Mikey Anderson, and that either Brandt Clarke or Jordan Spence would have be on the second or third pairings. But obviously that's not the case, so that is not an issue. So what is the third pairing going to be like for tonight's game? It's going to be Andreas Englund and Jordan Spence. Brandt Clarke is not going to make his 2023-24 season debut with the Kings against the Red Wings. Head coach Todd McClellan said that he wanted to get Clarke a few practices with the Kings before they put him into the lineup. That makes total sense. There's no need to rush him or press him into action. There isn't an injury need to do that. So let him get a couple practices in, and I assume we will see him at some point, probably soon, on the upcoming road trip, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And then we'll have the answer to the question, where does he slot in? Again, it seems to make too much sense that it will be on the third pairing in place of Jordan Spence. But until we see that, we won't know 100% for sure. One more question that we won't have answered until warm-up tonight is that who will be playing on the fourth line with Blake Lizotte and Trevor Lewis? Will it be the recently placed in the doghouse Arthur Kaliev or the very average and not do much Jarrett Anderson-Dolan? I think and hope it will be Kaliev, hopefully with a bit of a chip on his shoulder to show that he learned his lesson from being benched for a game and is ready to compete and be a plus and not a minus as he was in the game against the Oilers. Obviously, we're going to be looking with great interest tonight to see how the new line combinations are going to pan out. And we will, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, show you those line combinations. And if you're listening on the podcast, we'll tell you about them. But the projected starting lineup tonight for the LA Kings has a top line of Anze Kopitar, Quentin Byfield, and Trevor Moore. The second line is now going to be centered by Pierre Dubois, Adrian Kempe with him on the right wing, Alex Laferriere on the left wing. Philip Deneau has been moved to the third line with Kevin Fiala and Carl Grundstrom. So more minutes for Pierre-Luc Dubois and his line mates, you would think. A couple more shifts for them to show what they can do. And the aforementioned fourth line, Blake Lizotte with Trevor Lewis and either Arthur Kaliev or Jarrett Anderson-Dolan. As for the defensive pairings, we told you Drew Doughty is going to play tonight. We told you Brandt Clarke is not, so it will be the same pairings we've seen for most of the season. Mikey Anderson and Drew Doughty, Vladislav Gavrikov and Matt Roy, Andreas Englund, and Jordan Spence. As far as the lineup changes, we do have a quote from head coach Todd McClellan wanted to share with you. This was after the Toronto game where those line shifts and changes were made. And he said about the line changes, quote, "It was time. The execution had fallen off between individuals and connectivity." I think the guys used that word after the game, the Toronto game. And reviewing and looking back, we were better in the second half of the game as far as pace goes. We'll see where we go tomorrow. But for today, that's how we'll approach it. Talking about making those changes to try and mix things up and get the Kings offense going. As far as the goaltending situation for tonight, you may have saw it on the graphic we had for the projected lineup, but it looks like David Rittich will be in net tonight for the LA Kings. So far, since being called up as a replacement for the injured Phoenix Copley, Rittich has done about as well as you could expect. 2-0, goals against average of 1, and a save percentage of .951. Now, those are outstanding numbers. He's allowed just 1 goal in each of his 2 starts, but both those starts were against the worst team in the NHL, the San Jose Sharks. So he will have a bit of a step up in competition tonight against the Detroit Red Wings. We'll see what he could do. As for his career against Detroit, Rittich, pretty good. 3-0, .932 save percentage, and a .167 goals against average. Perhaps those numbers were part of the reason why Todd McClellan decided to give him another start and go in place of Cam Talbot. Now, Rittich did not face Detroit last season when he was the backup in Winnipeg. His last start against the Red Wings, December 7th, 2021, while he was playing for Nashville. He allowed 2 goals in a 5-2 victory. So that is the setup for the Kings tonight. Coming up, we'll take a look at the opponent for tonight, the Detroit Red Wings, and see how they stack up against our LA Kings. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Trevor Moore scores a hat trick and the LA Kings win the Stanley Cup. Sounds good, right? Well, you know what else sounds good? You winning 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with the Sleeper app as the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our top choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can pick more or less based on goals, assists, points, saves, and more. And Sleeper offers 100 times payouts. And although we love the NHL, not just about hockey, you've got the NFL regular season wrapping up. Playoffs are around the corner. The NBA is in full swing as well. Now is a great time to get in on all the amazing sports action. Make the right pick, and you could win big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. The LA Kings host the Detroit Red Wings tonight, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of the LA Kings on SiriusXM with the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Let's check in on the team comparisons between the Kings and the Detroit Red Wings for tonight's game. Kings come in with an overall record of 29-5 for 45 points, third in the Pacific Division. Kings are 7-7-4 at home and coming off a 3-0 shutout loss against the Maple Leafs on Tuesday. The Kings have lost 3 in a row. For Detroit, they are 18-16-4 this season, fifth place in the Atlantic Division for 40 points. They are 8-9-1 on the road so far this season, coming off a 5-3 win in San Jose over the Sharks on Tuesday. Now, Detroit has won 2 of their last 3 games, but before that, had a stretch of just 2 wins in 11 games. Kings have dropped to 10th in the NHL in goals scored per game, as we've mentioned, and as I'm sure you know, the offense has dried up of late. Kings are scoring 3.38 goals per game. They are still number 1 in the NHL as far as goals allowed per game at 2.35. As for the Red Wings, they are 5th in the NHL in goals scored per game at 3.58, 26th in the league in goals allowed per game at 3.45. So very similar to what we've seen from the LA Kings opponents of late in Toronto and in Edmonton. Very good offensively, not great defensively, but right now that's been a key against a struggling LA Kings offense, going up against good offensive teams and being outscored as of late. Hopefully that won't be the case tonight, but Detroit is a pretty good offensive team. The Kings are still 20th in the league on the power play, 18.8%, still number 1 in the NHL on the penalty kill at 87%. Detroit is a decent team on the power play, 12th in the NHL at 22.2%. They are 13th on the penalty kill at 80.8%, so pretty even as far as the special teams go for the Red Wings, both on the power play and the penalty kill. Not outstanding in either, but also pretty good. Individually, for the Red Wings, they are led in points and goals by offseason acquisition Alex DeBrincat. He's got 38 points and 17 goals on the season. Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond each have 31 points for the Red Wings. And they also picked up an old Kings rival, midseason pickup, Patrick Kane, former Blackhawks legend and future Hall of Famer. He's now a Red Wing. He has 6 goals and 13 points in 14 games since joining Detroit. So it'll be weird to see him in a Red Wings uniform, and he's done pretty good in a brief amount of time for Detroit. In net for the Red Wings, it'll be Alex Lyon. He has started the last 3 games for Detroit, so it looks like 4th straight start for him. He is 2-1 in his last 3 starts. Overall on the season, he is 6-4 with a 2.53 goals against average and a 9.17 save percentage. He's appeared in a total of 49 career NHL games, total record of 22-15-7. He's got a career 2.94 goals against average and a 9.06 save percentage in parts of 7 seasons with the Flyers, Hurricanes, Panthers, and now Red Wings. So he's a guy that has bounced around a bit, and the Red Wings are looking for a solution in net. And right now, it is Alex Lyon. Now, he has faced the Kings once in his career. That was a loss. He allowed 3 goals in a 4-3 game last season, January the 27th in Florida while with the Panthers. Detroit overall is a team that's in a rebuild, trying to get back into the playoffs. They've been out of the postseason the last 7 straight years. They are currently 2 points out of a wild card spot in the Eastern Conference, so certainly every game is precious for them. Their GM trying to resurrect this proud franchise is Hall of Famer and Detroit legend Steve Yzerman. They're playing under second-year head coach Derek Lalonde, who is a former assistant and Stanley Cup winner with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we now know about the opponent for the LA Kings tonight. How about the keys to the game for the LA Kings? And some of these things seem very basic, but right now the Kings aren't doing the basic things. So it's pretty much back to basics. First and foremost, I think get off to a good start and play a solid first period. The Kings have lost 3 in a row. They're about to go on their longest road trip of the season. You want to head out on a good note. There have been obviously the lineup changes. So come out with energy, play a solid first period, and hopefully build on that for the rest of the game. I think the second key to the Kings is keep it simple. The Kings have had a half a game and a practice to adjust to new line mates. And there is likely going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. Certainly these guys all know each other, but you get used to your line mates. You get used to their tendencies. You know what they do well. It's a fast game out there, and any advantage you have in knowing what your line mate is going to do and being instinctive about it is obviously an advantage, but that may not be the case here early on with these changes, especially when you're playing with a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois, who hasn't been around for very long. So keep it simple. Dump the pucks in the zone, get on the forecheck, play solid defense, do the basic things that lead to success while you're getting used to those new line mates. And the third key for the Kings, have a shot mentality. The Kings' number of shots on goal hasn't really decreased in this recent stretch where they haven't scored goals, only 4 goals in their last 3 games. But we saw it a bit, I thought, too much in the Toronto game. The Kings may be looking to get that perfect shot off, looking to pick a corner. When you got a chance to put the shot on net, put it on net, make the goaltender work, and of course, get traffic in front and hunt for pucks, look for rebounds, have that shot mentality, and look to take advantage of that. So some pretty basic things for the LA Kings, but again, I think right now they need to get back to basics, and hopefully they can do that against the Detroit Red Wings. For the Kings, they have won their last 6 meetings against Detroit. But they are not only looking for a win to snap a losing skid, but also to kickstart their longest road trip of the season coming up. We'll give you the details on that here next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including point spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And obviously, we love to bet on hockey. The NFL is certainly a big option as well. Now you can also bet on the Kings coming up for tonight's game against the Red Wings. LA is favored by 1.5 goals in this one. The over-under for the game is 6.5. You want to place a bet on the Kings to win? Think the game will have more or less than 6.5 goals? Well, you can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet all season long on the NHL and the NFL. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Well, the LA Kings have a big road trip coming up after tonight's game against Detroit. They will play 6 games in 10 days. It is the busiest and longest road trip of the season for the Kings. The previous longest trip was 4 games in 6 days. That was in early December. Started in Columbus, wrapped up in New York City. That was where the road winning streak came to an end. The longest trip after this current trip that's coming up will be another 4 games in 6 days. That starts February 13th in Buffalo and ends February 18th in Pittsburgh. So this current trip for the Kings, again, the longest and busiest of the season, 6 games in 10 days. It'll start in Washington, D.C. this coming Sunday, January the 7th. There'll be stops in Tampa, Florida, Detroit, Carolina, and Dallas. And the Hurricane Stars game to end the road trip will be back-to-back nights. As well as it stands, of those opponents the Kings will be facing on this upcoming road trip, 3 of them are currently holding down playoff spots. That would be Florida, Carolina, and Dallas. The other three are right in the thick of things as far as the wild card race in the Eastern Conference. Washington is actually tied with New Jersey for the final wild card spot in the East. Tampa Bay is just 1 point out of a wild card spot. And as we mentioned earlier, Detroit is 2 points out of a wild card spot. So all the teams the Kings are going to be facing, either teams that are good enough to be in the playoffs as it stands right now, or teams that are battling for playoff positioning, and every win, every point is important for those teams. So it is going to be a challenging road trip upcoming for the LA Kings. But I think the good news is this long road trip could be just the thing the Kings need to get refocused and back on track. Obviously, the Kings have played their best hockey of the season away from home, an NHL best 13-2-1 on the road so far this season. Holidays are over. It's obviously a busy time. You don't think about these guys as being human beings sometimes. We just look at them as hockey players. But as you know, in your life, the holiday season, a busy time, getting together with families, scheduling, trips and all kinds of stuff, getting toys for the kids. So all that is now put behind them. It's now kind of a refocus on hockey and another chance to rebond maybe with your teammates, go on this long road trip, and use it as something to get you back on track. Again, the Kings have played great away from home. So I actually think that this road trip, while it could be challenging, could also be the best thing for the LA Kings as well. Keep that road record going. Hopefully you can have a successful road trip and then carry it over when you return back home. A big upcoming road trip for the LA Kings, and it starts Sunday in DC. As for the end of this week for our show, you everydayers know that coming up on Friday, we have our usual fan feedback show. Of course, we're also going to recap the game against the Detroit Red Wings, let you know what we saw, what we liked. Certainly, again, the line combinations are going to be something we really take a look at to see how that can hopefully get the Kings going offensively. And certainly you have your chance to weigh in on the line changes, on the roster moves, on Tobias Bjornfot being lost, on Brandt Clarke being called up. All that is fair game for you to comment on and ask questions about with our Friday fan feedback show coming up, obviously, on Friday. If you would like to get an email in for that show, there is still time. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And as always, you can leave your comments if you're watching on the YouTube channel as well. Just leave your comments below. I definitely take a look at all of those. And if we have time, we try and pick out the best comments there. And we would love for you to also stay interactive with us on social media, X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked on LA Kings. And you can also send your comments that way as well if you would like. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked on LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. Looking forward to talking about hopefully a Kings win on Friday and a Friday fan feedback show as well. Kings taking on the Red Wings tonight. Hopefully we see some good things happen for the Kings with these line changes. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, we close out the show by saying, go Kings go.